Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sami Parvez show. Today, I'm joined by Kevin Kraft. He is an independent candidate for the Kelowna-Lake Country-Coldstream. We will be discussing about his independent campaign for BC provincial election. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining me on the Sami Parvez show. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sammy. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And could you please talk about your background? So why are you interested to running at this BC provincial election as an independent candidate?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the Okanagan. I grew up in Rutland. Part of Rutland and the high school that's within this riding. Um, I have a deeply rooted background in this community, and so when I graduated from university and wanted to start my family back here in the Okanagan, it's always been a passion of mine to get involved in different levels of different community societies. I got involved in my local fire hall. I worked at the university. I worked at drop in at risk youth program downtown. Like I've always been immersed in kind of community needs and community volunteerism and trying to give back to the community. And so in doing so, when I moved back, I got looped in with the regional district as an alternate for the previous director. And then in the last municipal elections, I was acclaimed as the regional district East area director. And now I sit as vice chair of the regional district board, and not being too pleased with how rural areas have been treated with regards to municipal versus rural and provincial legislation, and watching what's happening and dealing with kind of legislative and policy changes over the last 2 years. It's really kind of opened my eyes that the provincial MLA spot is that sweet spot where you can actually impact daily lives of people. You can take care of your community. You can really address local issues, and that independent opportunity really lends itself to doing that without having some party ties or lines that you're having to toe. And you can kind of really focus on that community feel. And I really feel like that's where um, trust and some interest with regards to politics needs to fall, because I feel like a lot of times, especially right now in our arguably polarized options, there's a lot of gap there that's not really being filled. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, and how do you see running as an independent candidate? Like, like we are bounded by two or three parties, like particularly in BC, we have Liberals or NDP, but this time Liberals suspended, which are now BC United, so now they are endorsing BC Conservative. So it seems like there are just two horse race. So where do you sit between those parties?
I would argue that I believe that there are some policies on both sides that are quite logical. I was raised to kind of lead by common sense, logic, and good judgment, and making sure I have the information before making a decision. So I think there's a lot of value in just having someone who's local and with that kind of perspective, regardless of right or left kind of identities. I
Mhm.
was raised relatively conservative. I do have a fiscal conservative background, and I am interested in making sure that taxation and representation are fair, as well as there's some balance between industry and green initiatives, right? And I feel like the only way forward is really bringing those groups together and actually getting people in the room to have some civil discourse and really map that path forward. And it's an opportunity that hasn't really existed in the province before, with potential of independent candidates holding that balance of power.
Yep. And at this time, earlier today, I was speaking with another independent candidate, Kevin Acton, who is also mayor of Lumbee, and he is running as Warner Lumbee. And he brought up to my attention that a record number of independent candidates are running in BC, like 36 candidates. So let me go further. Like we have a psychological, we have made our psychology. We have to vote either conservative or liberal, or sometimes NDP. Now there is a small portion goes to Greens. They can also they have few seats, but it means they are making an impact. But in terms of like independent candidates, what do you hear from the doorsteps? Do they say, "Oh, we this time we are changing our mind to giving an opportunity to an independent candidate who particularly works for their constituents?"
Yeah, I think, I mean, like I mentioned before, there's been a lot of trust lost and uncertainty, and that weighs on people heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes with both sides of the coin, right and left. I think there's uncertainty and distrust and dislike with regards to either side and their plans and policies. So when we are in unprecedented
Yeah.
times,
Mm-hmm.
in BC. Never have we had, a party that was the official opposition completely disappear. Um, and the actual independent opportunity is something that is getting out there more and more. The media is actually covering it more and more.
Yeah.
And I really think, you're watching the news and you're kind of watching, the political experts talk about it. And they're still kind of brushing it off
Mm-hmm.
with regards to the independent movement. But I think it's going to surge quite significantly, especially here in the central Okanagan. I mean, we have Stephen Johnson, we have Ashley Ramsey, we have Dr. Humor, we have Kevin Acton, we have myself, all running. We're all, arguably relatively high caliber candidates when compared to the other party candidates,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a chance to make a significant impact. And I mean, it was funny. I was at UBCM last week in Vancouver,
Yeah.
and I listened to EB kind of make a comment about his opposition and John Rustad, and he said, "Oh, you can run independent." It seems like a lot of people are doing that these days. Um, and in my mind, I couldn't really believe that he could be that ignorant, not once but twice within a year, to see a party move from 5% approval to 40% approval and actually putting him at risk of losing the election,
Mm-hmm.
or the independent movement that's putting pressure and might hold the sway of power between both parties.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're taking it as seriously as they perhaps should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I need to ask you. So as you said, there is a growing number of independent candidates are running in this BC election. So if you guys like whoever win, like there would be more number of independent candidates. Are you going to get affiliated or join one party, or are you going to make your own party or a group to work together during next
Yeah,
parliament session?
it's hard to say. I mean, as an independent who hasn't been part of the BC United entity prior,
Yeah.
I'm not part of the conversations that they may have as other groups and things like that. And as independents or unaffiliated, we are basically mandated to not collude with each other as independent candidates, even though we understand our goals and efforts. Like, we have to be very careful in how we do uh, business and advertising and things that we do. So I'm trying to run a very clean race that is just it's me. It's from a humble place. I'm trying to represent my community as best as I can, and really hoping that the media and that the momentum that at least what I'm seeing in my community really takes hold in other communities as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and what are you hearing from Kelowna-Lake Country-Coldstream where you are running as an independent candidate? So what are you hearing from the doorsteps? What are their
What am I
main
hearing from the
circumstances?
constituents?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's concern about, like they're talking about the vote split, and they're talking about the other things that are at risk. And like, I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about democracy here and like providing choice. And I would argue that the candidates in place, particularly in this riding, um, aren't necessarily as rooted in the community as they could and should be to really address the community issues. I mean, John Rustad's come out and said a couple times that he wants his candidates to represent their ridings as expressively as possible.
Mhm.
But it's tough to trust that because you're still towing a party line, as well as many candidates aren't necessarily rooted in their communities as well as others. So there's a challenge there, and I really think there's three things going on, and especially what I hear from the doors is that there was a lot of people who wanted to abstain from voting. They
Mhm.
weren't happy with either option.
Yeah.
So that hurts to hear because, as someone who's always participated in every vote that I can, I think that's the most important expression of your opinions when it actually matters is voting and getting out there and getting that vote. So if I can motivate others that are maybe choosing that they don't want to choose a political camp, but I get them out, that's a very powerful tool. Um, Not only that, but I'd argue that my value of policies and principles on either side of the left and right, and placing myself perhaps center right, will actually pull from both sides with interest. And I know that the political value in local representation really matters. So I think I'm going to be pulling from both sides. And
Mhm.
then, I mean, the biggest thing and my biggest point is that if people are actually worried about the vote split, either party should have done a better job in recruiting candidates that are quite influential in their communities.
Yep.
And if they aren't doing their job at vetting and really looking at candidates and quit playing politics, but actually put that community and listening to your locals first, that would create somewhat of a sustainable government and representation, I would think.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and what solutions do you have? Like, I think the major issues are healthcare, housing, affordability.
Yeah, I mean, like it's tough without a party background and having candidates who are perhaps specialists, or you have a team that are researching and studying the issues. You
Hmm.
can only really rely on what you're passionate about, what your background is, and what you're really engaged with. And so I guess my point there being is that as the only candidate in Kelowna-Lake Country-Coldstream with some political experience at the regional district level, I've been dealing with some of the policy changes and legislative changes over the last 2 years. And so I've seen how, we're talking about housing and taking away, potential Airbnb opportunities in the Okanagan, which is a tourism hotbed, and
Hmm.
a few other things like that, which I kind of can see both sides of the coin when you're talking about it, but also see how investment and encouragement of investment and business operations really are impacted in the long run. And so housing is a big one that both parties are going to talk about. Obviously, carbon tax is something that both parties are going to talk about.
Yeah.
Obviously, healthcare is a major issue. I have a young family. I worry all the time if an emergency happens. What are we actually going to do? Like
Yeah.
that weighs on everybody's mind. And so, um, as an independent, it's not necessarily where I have the power to influence, but
Hmm.
the unique opportunity about an independent is I can knock on the door of both the NDP and the Conservatives or whoever's sitting in as a minister and say, hey, I have an idea that might shift that policy in a way that could actually benefit everybody without taking the legs out from some others. And so I think, the opportunity as an independent to have influence on policy changes that are better for the masses would be a huge opportunity that other people should respect. For me personally, my background, I was a firefighter for 8 years. I worked for UBC Okanagan for 8 years. I'm on the Airport Advisory Council right now. All of those factors, we have pressures in our post-secondary institutions with regards to budgets and international student capacity and things going on. So we're going to have to pivot to more local driven interest, research, development, industry, technology. And I'd really love to see the Okanagan, whether it be Okanagan College or UBCO,
Mhm.
really look at an agri-tech or agricultural faculty that's rooted in the Okanagan, so that research and studies can give us the best information and data we can have to deal with things like climate change and climate uncertainty and different markets and different impacts and things that are going on that kind of have trickle down effects into our entire economy.
Mhm. Yeah, and thank you so much for your service as a firefighter. And so where do you stand with the carbon tax? Do you support a carbon tax or do you think it should be abolished?
I think right now, I'll frame it this way. If John Rustad is sincere about removing the carbon tax, or EB is sincere about removing the carbon tax, with Ottawa lifting its position, um, I think that it should be something that is part of the past. I think if we're talking about major polluters in industry, that's perhaps a different discussion. But directly putting that cost on constituents, homeowners, and small business owners and farmers, in my opinion, is just ridiculous. And the trickle down effect on everything is impacted. We'd be silly to say that. It's really benefiting how it's structured here in at least BC, because we have a provincial carbon tax, and we don't necessarily see the same rebates as across the country.
Mhm.
And so we're in a weird time. I wish when they first started the carbon tax, they really had a clear, transparent goal with it and had like direct funding for incentives. So every home built before 2005 would have heavily incentive applied to renewing their ACs, or they're getting a heat pump, or they're getting a brand new furnace, high efficiency furnace. Because then you have tangible data on reducing your carbon footprint and reducing your energy use. And I think that would make everyone on all sides actually pretty happy and supportive. But that's just not the case with what's happening. So I really think we need to just kind of clean the slate, wash the desk off, and restart what we're dealing with here. And you know, I have concerns. I have concerns with regards to. I don't know if you're up to date on the rent and mortgage rebate that the conservatives have put forward.
Mhm.
So I'll frame it like this, because as a fiscal conservative, I'm troubled where they're going with this, because when we're talking about money and budgets, BC United, before they folded, they were putting out there that they were you know pushing for $50,000 income tax free on the first $50,000 of everybody, which put roughly just over $2,000 back in everyone's pockets over the course of a year. Okay, sure. But that also caused a potential $4.5 billion deficit in already a deficit position government. So, you know, I hear cha-ching, 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 and I'm like, okay, where's that money coming from, right? But then at the same time, I'm looking at the rent and mortgage rebate um, offer from the BC Conservatives at starting in 2026. I think it was $1,500 a month as a rebate for rent and mortgage. And I don't know if it was per household or per renter. I'm not really sure. They haven't been clear with what the application would be. But if we're talking those numbers, like we're talking an amount that's well above and beyond $4.5 billion. Like we're talking a lot. And in the terms of the BC Conservatives thinking about that program and removing the carbon tax, that troubles me as a constituent who's paying taxes. I'm like, whoa, how are we even going to do that? Like, and to get there would be a huge amount of staff time, a huge amount of work. In my mind, if that's how much money the province has that's actually being mismanaged, that it could be applied that way, then we as constituents and taxpayers need to be absolutely furious at the mismanagement of what's going on right now in the province. If they're proposing that sort of fiscal, rebate and have it not impact the bottom line, then I think that is unfathomable. So it's just interesting times right now, because I think you're going to see both sides start throwing some Hail Mary kind of policies And
Mhm.
I think that's where the benefit is from an independent standpoint is we don't have a leg to stand on with regards to throwing out policies that are going to impact fiscal anything or anything like that. But at the same time, if we have a group of independents who are holding that swing of power, um, we can at least keep the conservatives and the NDP in check with regards to how those things are applied.
Mhm. And where do you stand with those policies? You said they will give a tax break until like 50,000. So how much it should be like in your opinion?
Well, I mean, the BC United offer is no longer on the table, obviously, with the party out. But I think there's some validity there. I don't know if it was. I don't know if the 50,000 was the magic number, or if it should start at 25, or just something, right? And
Yeah.
and I don't know if that's a policy that will continue.
Mhm.
But I also know that the amount of work that's going to have to go into the back end of the rent and mortgage rebate, like it's going to be significant. And I don't know if it's necessarily better because in my opinion at the end of the day, and at least from my opinion as a taxpayer and constituent in the area, I want to quit giving the government my money to
Mhm.
get it back in one way shape or form and then kind of be told how to spend it and apply it. I'd rather just keep the money and use it how I see fit. And I
Mhm.
think everyone is at that point where it's like I don't want to deal with more taxes and weird rebates. I just want to have it more affordable and my month to month things are accountable and I can actually apply my money where I see fit and where I value.
Mhm.
And that can't be too much to ask.
Yep.
So if we're talking about all of these kind of rebates and everything else, it's like, man, like, why wouldn't you just lower PST by 1% and see what
Mhm.
happens?
Yeah. Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, no, I'm done. But it's just an interesting point, like, and that just came out yesterday. So I
Yeah.
was just trying to think, how would that actually be applied? So it's at this point I can't really think of how unless they come up with really really good clear data and clear direction.
Hmm. Yeah, and as you worked as a firefighter, and we know like there was not much fire at this time in this year in British Columbia, but we saw in Alberta, Jasper, so that community completely burned down. But out, so then Canada brought in firefighters from South Africa. It happened in the past too. So are we lack of funds? Are we lack of resources? So why we don't have enough firefighters to combat these fire forests?
Well, we got a few things going on right now. I mean, so BC Wildfire is now a year-round entity. It only used to be a seasonal entity, and I think it's going into its second season now as a full-term service. That's significant in two ways. We can apply a lot of staff time, a lot of GIS research, and a lot of information around fire mitigation, fire planning, emergency planning, more boots on the ground. Would I like to see more support or perhaps the fire, BC Wildfire, be given some authority to tour the backcountry
Mhm.
and educate and or fine people who are abusing, fire and privilege and having poor fire habits in the backcountry, especially in particular when a fire ban is on.
Mhm.
I think we still have man-caused, human-caused fires that are wildly unnecessary in and around, particularly interface zones around municipalities and cities and small towns. Um, as a firefighter and with some of that background, I can say that if our conversation before about money and allocation and where it's going, like if we're taking climate change for example as a very serious threat, wildfire is a massive part of that and how it impacts British Columbians. The fact that we are still here, even after 2003 in the Okanagan, where we don't necessarily have the resources, the apparatus, or the boots on the ground to put out fires quickly wherever they are, backcountry, interface zones, whatever. The faster you can get on a fire and put it out, the less dangerous and the less volatile it will be. Full stop. So if that's helicopters, that's aircraft, that's on the ground teams, that's whatever, the fast response is what is going to be, causing the best results in every fire season. And British Columbia, like in the Okanagan and in the coast, like we did have a relatively good fire season. We had a few spark ups, we had a few fires, we had small fires, but our teams, I think the pressure is on, and the firefighters know in the communities that they need to get on it fast and put it out fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it was unfortunate because you have a thunderstorm roll through, and for example, the Kootenays or northern British Columbia wasn't as lucky as we were in the Okanagan this year, because there were significant fires, and obviously when it starts in that number, it's overwhelming. But there are so many synergies between a struggling forestry industry right now, BC wildfire, freshwater management, and agriculture strategies. There's so many synergies and things that just fit together that can help, with fire preparedness, fire prevention, fire smart practices, really applying funding for apparatus and equipment and staff, really making sure that fire, when it comes to British Columbia, there's no question we're trying to do our best. And that's where it should be. That's where I'd love to see it. I know there's a lot of ambition there. But I think, if we're talking about these types of investments and fiscal opportunities and fiscal policies that either party is going to put out here soon, I hope to see one that deals with fire directly. Mm-hmm. And we'll see. But as an independent, I can go in and knock on that ministry's door and advocate for that every single time. And where I was going with the climate change situation was that majority of British Columbian forests are managed, mm-hmm. And sadly the forestry industry and so their pivot that they're on, we have a lot of middle-aged forests. There's a lot of dead trees, dead standing within them, basically just creating really favorable conditions for volatile fires. Mm-hmm. And that's no good. We need to do a better job in getting that preparation work done. But at the end of the day, it's a product, and it's a product that we can actually use and come up with uses for. So I think there's just some balls being dropped that are not really taking traction anywhere. I think really we need to see how we can influence that industry and really benefit everybody.
Mm-hmm. And who is more responsible for this wildfire, to take a leg down? Is it like, as you said, there are many dead trees? They are also they are not, the officials are not doing their job. So is it federal level, provincial level, or local level government?
Well, most forests in BC, most of it is provincial jurisdiction, unless it's a federal park, and obviously provincial parks. So when it comes to interface zones, it's difficult because there's a lot of woodlots and managed woodlots around different municipalities and different smaller governments and smaller towns and population centers. So really, it's a struggle because municipalities have their local firefighters and their fire service. The regional districts have rural fire halls and kind of rural fire service. And then we have BC wildfire. And there's interesting jurisdictional issues that impact who can respond when. Mm-hmm. And so even though a regional fire hall who can respond to perhaps quickest might not get called out, and it'll be handled by BC wildfire, right? But every time you do that, there's an inherent risk of perhaps that fire getting out of control. Mm-hmm. So there's jurisdictional issues for sure. But another thing, the federal government needs to step up with regards to major action in our federal parks. But the provincial government needs to do the same in our provincial parks, as well as guide the forestry industry on how to take more proactive steps in the interface zones, whether that be logging style or management strategies or clear cuts and not letting deadfall just be there, like really making sure that there's less fuel on the ground, obviously is a huge step in the right direction. And we got to remember, uh, fires are, for the most part, a natural occurrence out there in the world. And there's a lot of plants, there's a lot of wildlife that respond positively after a fire has gone through. So there's really that current debate of like, is fire good? Is fire bad? How can it be managed better? How do we manage our forest floor? For example, opening up traditional burning or opening up our burn seasons so we can burn more fuel in the off seasons while there's low risk of a major fire starting, so that we can eliminate a lot of fuel load and a lot of smoke from our properties and everything else. There has to be a lot of work done with the ALR and the local governments to really open that up, to have property owners, feel responsible, but always act to manage their fuel loads and ensure that fire smart principles are there, so they don't have to worry about their homes or properties as much without doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let's jump to health crisis. I know like there is also crisis of health in BC, and John Rustard, BC conservative leader, is calling to shutting down safe injection sites. So where do we stand on this issue?
Yeah. So I mean, the area of Rutland, like we having grown up there, like we as kids, I know it was a different generation, but we as kids used to go out and play and come home when the street lights turned on, and it was safe. We felt safe. We felt safe in our communities. And I know with not only development pressure and population growth, and there's pressures along there, but there's also pressure, especially in the Okanagan, with regards to homeless and drug addiction and transient behavior, theft, auto theft, break and enters, and it's on the rise, and it's concerning. And so that adds multiple layers between your healthcare and your law enforcement and local pressures, and that is a very unfortunate thing. And right now, what we're doing with the NDP is we're coming up with policies or services that are sustaining the symptoms of bad policy. And so I don't agree that there should be safe injection sites or different sites and services spread out across towns and spread out across different municipal centers. I really think if we're going to take that approach, we should centralize services so that everyone knows where to go when they need, like if they're on welfare or if they're needing safe injection or they need to be monitored, or there's at least some sort of integrated health community law enforcement entity that is around, just to make sure that everyone's safe, themselves included. And so it's troubling to see how health, interior health in the province has placed some of these facilities in and around the different communities, because homeowners are worried about their safety or their assets. Business owners are worried about their products or again their assets. Insurance costs are on the rise, or people have to spend more money on security and different things like that. All of these things are increased costs.
Yep.
And when the increased costs come to homeowners and businesses alike, regardless, the costs are just passed on as best as they can and impact the purchaser or the actual end product in the long run, let alone carbon tax and all these other conditions that are in existence.
Yeah. And so how do you think we should take care? Should there be tougher penalties for those who break the laws? Like there are some also laws like which are very light catch and release.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of what's going on with regards to catch and release. We have multiple time offenders within a very short period of time. Um, at times they are in crisis. They are in the time of their greatest need, uh, and they're at the point where they'll do anything to get what they need or what they're trying to do. Um, is that safe for anybody out there? No, it's not. Like, I mean, so it's difficult to kind of grasp um, our current conditions and you know, hey, we got you. You're in jail overnight. Your court date's going to be 2 weeks from now. See you later. And it's like, wait a minute, like that's it. You know, like we were talking about, you know, a stolen vehicle, or we're talking about something else where it's like, hey, like I don't necessarily think that at this moment they're a really good contributing citizen to our society. So I mean, I'm not a fan of the catch and release system. I do think that there needs to be harsher penalties um, with regards to crimes being committed. I do think that personal accountability needs to be really focused on, you know, we're responsible for what we say out there in the world, online, recorded, different things, right? And seemingly it's applied to the vast many of us, and some perhaps not, right? And personal accountability goes a long way when it comes to making our decisions, how we speak to one another, how we market our brand or business, or how we, you know, some of us break the law and you know, be accountable for your actions, be accountable for what you say,
Mhm.
and you know, ultimately, what comes from that should be upheld. That's it.
Yep. And so you already posted your signs. So did you post out like put away all of those signs what you posted on your Facebook?
Sorry, did I post what?
Like you posted a picture of your
Yeah,
signs,
yeah.
like did you put away all of those signs?
Oh yeah, it was the late night last night and early morning. Yeah, it. I have maybe a handful in the truck that still need to go out. Coldstream and Oyama are one side of the riding, and then Joe Rich and Ellison and Rutland are the other side of the riding. So I'm handling Rutland right now and that half of things. My website, kevinkraft.ca, should be up and running, you know, by today or tomorrow. And it's going to spark a lot of interest. There's already been a ton of local support. Um, and really, yeah, like the signage is one thing. It's one of those material things that you have to do in elections, right? You have to have materials. You got to go door knock. You got to create signs. You got to have your website. But I mean, really, I think today's day and age, media and video blogs and video interviews and different sources of media is really what gets the people informed about who they're voting for.
Mhm.
And so I think now more than ever, like I mean, we have unprecedented conditions both in you know, our political landscape, but we have unprecedented conditions in our social media impact and how we can influence. And we have content creators that are covering all kinds of political, you know, ins and outs and policy, and it's exciting because you got to keep tabs on all of that because it's fast moving.
Yeah. And is there anything else I did not ask you you would like to share?
You know, I really want to push the narrative that if you have a independent candidate in your riding, to definitely take the time to look at the candidates before you vote on October 19th, who can best represent your community, your values, and your needs from the community. That is definitely a message that needs to get out there more and more. And at the end of the day, you know, we'll see the results. My hope is that there is a very strong appetite for true locally rooted independent representation. And I think people are looking for that opportunity to gain trust in the government,
Mhm.
which perhaps has been missing for some time.
Mhm. Yeah, and what's your message particularly to Kelowna-Lake Country-Coldstream?
What's my message?
Yes.
My message is that if you vote for Kevin Kraft, you're voting for a local choice and a local voice. And having grown up here, I couldn't think of anything more exciting and more humbling to do than represent you on a provincial stage. I really think that representation of local issues and really being ruthless with regards to addressing those local issues and getting some traction on the things that impact our day-to-day lives is really valuable. And the only way to really hold either side or either party accountable in this provincial election that's going on is with an independent group that is potentially holding power and holding each side accountable.
Okay, thank you. And would you like to comment, if you get elected, you are going to give interviews to independent journalists or like myself, again appearing on the Sami Parvez show because it is hard to get elected officials or those are like a safe seat or from party nomination. They hardly ever give interviews like myself.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I am rooted in the community. I love engaging with not only constituents but independent media and different at all levels. And I think that that's where the message truly is spread among different interest groups. And so I really think, and I thank you again for the opportunity because I really think that that's the type of stuff that matters, and that's the type of stuff that's going to matter in the coming years and in the coming elections.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Kraft. It was a great pleasure to have you here from BC, and hopefully see you again. And wishing you very best on your election campaign. Or hopefully looking forward to seeing you as an elected MLA in this upcoming election.
Thanks, Sami. And again, thank you for the opportunity, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for reaching out. We'll stay in touch.
Yeah, my pleasure, sir. Stay in
All the
touch and
best.
take care. Bye. Have a
Take
good
care.
one, sir.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.